You are now listening to Coach Ham's Chronicles, the show that spills all types of leadership tea for the aspiring leader of colour.
Hello and welcome to Coach Ham Chronicles, the show that spills all types of leadership tea for your everyday 9 to 5. I am your host, Coach Ham, and today we're going to be talking with the infamous, the phenomenal, the magnificent Miss Juana Saborio. Can I say it that way? Does that make it easier?
I love the flavor, Juana Silverio.
Well, I guess we'll do Silverio, right?
Yes.
So we're going to be talking about the ins and outs of navigating the workplace etiquette and offer our listeners just a little bit of a surprise at the end, but you're going to have to listen all the way through to get all of the details. So let's get started, shall we? So
Yes.
Super excited to have you. So Jay, welcome to the show. I'm really blessed to have you. I really appreciate this.
Oh my God. Thank you for having me. I love the format and the tone and just the welcomeness of your podcast. So I am honored to be on.
Awesome. So here's a couple of things that we want to kind of just kick off before we start getting deep and nitty gritty into the heart of it. So we decided that on your show that we want to talk about how to save face in the workplace. And this was going to be a 2-part series. And one of the biggest things that I know that we were focused on last week was how can leaders preserve dignity and build trust?
Right.
So we're going to be digging all types of tea for that, because I know with you having just a full list of just information for our listeners, I definitely want to kind of give a couple of stats and numbers, because I'm all about the numbers, baby. So let's
That you are.
get right. So let's get to it. So when I was reading this one particular article, it stated that for Westernized culture, right? This is us Americans, North Americans, pretty much anyone that's really Westernized, that the expression of saving face, and I'm using quotes right now, usually means that it's someone that's trying to protect their own interests, which things that we already know. However, in order to cultivate this belonging and building of innovation amongst companies, and I'm talking about your Fortune 500s, employees need to feel heard. Once again, things that we already know. So my question is, well, according to this recent article by Harvard Business, 30% of employees think that their opinions have not been heard and that they don't really matter. So before we kind of get into it, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I'm not going to dispute a Harvard Business article, but from my lived experience, I do think that a lot of the workplaces that people of color experience are performative. So they say they want your opinion. They will put up some type of organization or instrument within the company, such as employee resource groups, to get your opinion and basically suck up all your knowledge. But at the end of the day, they don't have the necessary tools they need to actually implement the work that they need to do in order for people of color to feel heard.
Mm. That's interesting, right? So during one of my day jobs, we were part of this group called like the Federal African American Millennials Group. In my head, it literally reminds you of the Black Student Union of this particular agency. It literally is. It is that. It's like you have all these people. It's almost like that slang for FUBU, for us, by us.
Right.
Right. So when you're having this FUBU of an organization, because of course it's an ERG, but you're absolutely right. You pretty much have us on a pedestal, sucking everything that we know we love, but yet no one's seeing any paychecks or increases in any of this information. So we're going to kind of get into a lot of that. But before we get started, I just want everyone to know who you are, why you're so dope, how we kind of came to be. So with our guest today, Miss Juana Silverio. This is a life, career, and leadership development coach. Now, she is a licensed attorney by trade and by stunting on them, but she's also a civil servant. And that's probably one of the most amazing things about her, that she decided that she wanted to give back, but she also has a mindset for women and people of color so they can start elevating. She has a passion for leadership development, not just in the civil servant for employees, but also for aspiring C-suite executives. So she's going to share with us this concept of preserving dignity and building trust. So Jay, thank you so much for coming. I really do appreciate it. So let's kind of get started in talking about psychological safety and how we need to start leveling up.
Right. So honestly, I'm coming from, as you said, a few different backgrounds. I've worked on political campaigns. I've worked in the government sector, and I've also worked in the private sector. And when it comes to psychological safety, I do believe that what I have experienced, again, because I'm not going to put it in the context of what all folks of color with a similar background will experience, but what I have experienced is folks our leaders come in and they grow within the company. So most of the time they're like 17, 18, 19-year-old. They start at like the first level and they are brought up. But people like you or me, Ayana, we don't know that those opportunities are available. We're told a different story. And so the folks in these leadership positions, they are only bringing up people that look like them, sound like them, or are in their own circle. So they don't understand that we are coming from different psychological backgrounds, that we're feeling something different, that when when we're presented one thing and then X happens and it doesn't align with the thing that we were sold in the beginning, that we're going to have emotions and we're going to show them. And yeah.
No, keep going. This is good.
And so it's a disconnect, which creates the disparity in how we are chosen to come up in leadership positions. And so I do think that the psychological safety aspect of leadership development and for folks who want to come into the C-suite is an important factor for companies and even government agencies to understand, because we're not speaking the same language. You think we're speaking the same language because I went to a college and I came out with a bachelor's degree or a law degree or whatever other degrees, right? Because we come from a variety of spectrums and we come with expert opinion, but we're told one thing as we're coming up, as the folks who are representing leadership are told a different thing. So we're never working on the same plane.
So one of the things that I think we started to notice over our years of coaching and also just being in different workplaces, that a critical component of any functional team have to be psychological safety.
Right.
And for our leaders, you're going to have to be extremely mindful of the impact of your own decisions, words, your actions, and how that has the impact on those that you're working with, for, and those who work for you. Now, when we're starting talking about addressing some of these negative emotions, just like you said, like it becomes the status quo that people are only hiring what they know. They want that image reflection. I want to hire someone that looks like me, sounds like me, that's not going to really challenge me, which then
Correct.
goes back to this whole discussion of diversity and inclusion, or let's just be honest, Jay, or the lack thereof in most of these government agencies. It's like, yeah, you sound good. And just because you slap on for advertising purposes a brown or a bronze face, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's diverse, let alone the thought process being diverse. So when you start displaying humility and just emotional intelligence as a whole, one thing that's going to have to signal is trust. And it starts from the top all the way down. Like this
Absolutely.
is that trickle down effect. So let's kind of dive into some of these questions, shall we?
Yes.
So as we are really trying to figure out how we need to start bettering up and leveling up as women of color, how can we manage change in order to cultivate safety in our own workforce? And I'm talking about our current workforce now.
Right. I mean, one of the things, the way that we as Black women feel safe is if we see people who look like us. Plain and simple. Like I walk into a workplace and I'm looking for the next Black, Hispanic, Asian. At this point, I just need a woman of color to understand, because for me, it makes it feel comfortable. It's like, I'm not the only one. Right. But most of the time, that's not what we're doing. That's not what's happening. So I think one of the steps, and you can add on to this, is that we need to have almost like an advisory council an advisory council of, when the diva comes in, diva with all of the experiences, but not necessarily did not go to Harvard, but does come with an experience. Like, let's talk about how she amplifies, but not detracts from your mission. What do you think? Did I lose you?
Hello?
I think I lost you.
Sorry, for some reason, service is acting really, really weird. But please do continue.
No, so I said, like, it's almost like instead of having an employee resource group, I think it's an advisory council, because we need to have almost like the leaders need to have counsel on how do we include, or how are we receptive? It's not even an include, right? Because they think inclusion is just by having me at the table or having me in pictures. But how do we receive the information that this, executive or this person of color that doesn't necessarily represent my background, like, how do we include that information without being condescending? And I don't think it happens with just an employee resource group. I don't think it happens with saying that you have a diversity and inclusion executive. I think it's a constant conversation where is a give and take.
So with that being said, so of course, the biggest thing as of late, especially watching CNN, is General Milley's comments in reference to critical race theory, right, being pretty much disbanded in schools. I mean, there's been all types of articles out with all of these schools pretty much being in an uproar for most rural areas, I should say, that is just upset about having this being taught to their children. And let's just be very frank, right? For us to even have those conversations, like, those are the hardcore conversations that makes diversity what it is.
Right.
But you can't necessarily exclude what has happened, just like you can't just gloss over the fact that there was slavery. And you let people in the South tell it, they'll make it seem like, oh, they were just happy-go-lucky people that chose to stay. Over 400 years, it was like a yacht, and we brought them over. They loved it, and they just wanted a ticket.
Let's just ignore that there were so many who died on the way, and so many that you threw overboard. Come on.
Right. Amistad is probably the scariest movie I can ever watch. I will never forget my parents taking me during Black History Month to watch it as a family, and I had nightmares. I was like, this is the scariest shit known to man. And yet, this is just what it was. And I think what made it horrifying, one, because I was a kid, but then two, having to watch these mothers, these babies being born, and that you have these people now who just want to gloss over, like, well, always the one excuse is, well, that happened so long ago. I'm still seeing my brothers and my sisters getting mauled over in the street. I'm still terrified to be driving around being Black. These are things that don't necessarily just go away with time. So when you start talking about that critical race theory and having these hard conversations, I think the first step of any of these conversations is being open and honest about what needs to actually change. And it's not to just have these cute little small keys, but it's saying, look, this isn't working anymore. This doesn't work. You can't serve certain demographics that have been underrepresented for years based off of X, Y, and Z. So what are you willing to do about it? And you can't then have the executives smile like, well, do you not see all these diverse faces on this wall? That just happened for 1 year, sir. And that's only because Biden just got elected. But prior to that, y'all definitely had nothing but old generic white men on this wall.
Right.
So now the question is this diversity and inclusion thing a trend? Or is this actually a way of us moving forward?
Right. And I do think that when we talk about critical race theory, the argument isn't about, oh, I am pitting one race against the other. And again, this is my personal opinion, not an expert opinion. But it's about having a wider conversation that is just not that I came off a slave ship and that we picked cotton and we've overcome cotton, right? Like when it comes down to it, it's how are the power dynamics playing across our communities? And that means like, how does that affect me when I am going to buy a home in a neighborhood that in the past was zoned to make sure that a person who looked like me could not be here? Right. And then when it comes to the workplace, like I was told that I couldn't read. So how does that play? Or that my name, sounds too exotic. I hate that word exotic, by the way. So I'm automatically, without you looking at my credentials, my accomplishments, or the work that I have contributed or how I can contribute, I'm automatically X'd out. And so that's what I think is the importance of critical race theory in the classroom, but also in workplaces, to understand how you need to unlearn a lot of the biases that have been entrenched in society. We've learned by subconsciously, we've learned purposefully, and now we need to start unlearning that. And I think workplaces, it's not, as you said, about putting me on your wall as, the 5-star employee, but understanding that it is more than just me coming off a slave ship and you putting me on a wall. It's about understanding that I'm told I have to do triple the work to get to where I'm at. Where all you have to do is walk in the door.
Yeah. Or better yet, you do the bare minimum, you smile and you have your dusty 99.99 Men's Warehouse suit that you got for clearance. And next thing you know, you have been boosted up. You're now in a C-suite overlooking a beautiful landscape, and you brought your 10 closest dummy friends.
Correct.
Right. Hence why P&A was literally created to start to knock out all of these labels, misrepresented individuals, and make sure that people are actually getting not just seats at the table to be taking notes, but they're actually able to contribute. So let's start moving into the next question. So here's, once again, by the numbers, right? So 24% of employees report that their managers aren't even aware of their pain points. And yet we start talking about strategic alignment. And that has to allow not just the leader, but their team to figure out what exactly they need to do to start leveling up. So my question to you is, El Doctor, what do leaders need to do to focus in order for them to not be so oblivious to their own staff's pressure points?
It's probably going to sound cliche or like, that's a dumb answer. But honestly, you need to start looking at me like I'm you. Right? So, for instance, I had a boss who had a young daughter with disabilities. And so the things that you're looking at is, how am I going to take care of her from, the point where she's supposed to be independent? What kind of resources am I setting up for her so that she can, go to the grocery store? How is she going to learn how to manage her bank account? How am I going to put her through college? When I'm not here, what kind of trust or bank account am I setting up for her? Those are the same issues that I am having, right? As a person of color, if I were to have a child with disabilities. And so oftentimes I think, the leaders in these companies focus on a number as opposed to us as people. And so one of the things that I think would go, far is, we are humans and we have feelings, and, like things will fall, like the things that you say, the things that you do, if it's incongruous with what you have said you're going to, do, and you do something differently, that's going to have an effect. And we shouldn't be expected to act as if it's normal practice. Like, acknowledge that we're having feelings, that it doesn't fall with, how we feel. And hey, we also have obligations just like you do. And these may not help us in fulfilling those obligations outside of this workplace.
So that kind of boils or like falls into having that emotional agility, being able to understand that not only am I having to tame these emotions, but I'm also having to direct them in a way that they're supposed to be going. So you're
Correct.
being really intentional. You're being super rigorous when it comes to how you're feeling, what you're feeling. You're even labeling them in a way that you understand exactly what it is. So you can then start having these conversations. You're right, though. So many times companies just see people as just making widgets that they
Right.
forget that these numbers actually have names. So, especially for you, right? Because your background is Afro Latina,
Yes.
which is like phenomenal, right? Um, and the one thing that I remember you mentioned in the beginning of the show is that you have worked in an array of just different fields. So from the congressional side of the house to the government to the private sector, do you see a difference in between any of these three fields, or are they pretty much the same?
Well, I find that I am blessed to be able to cross, I guess, three different worlds at this point, right? The
Mm-hmm.
American world, the world as a Black woman, and the world as a Black Latina. But when people see me, they only see me as a Black woman.
Mm.
They and the shock and awe and disbelief that presents from then, it's disappointing at this point, but almost expected. So what is the difference? I don't see a difference other than I feel like I've had to prove that I deserve to be in this room.
Mm.
Because they're not looking at, oh, she's come out with a law degree. Oh, she's the first one in, the oldest of six and the first one out of her immediate family to graduate from college and get a master's degree and open up these doors for her family and her siblings and her nieces and nephews, right? They're not
Mm-hmm.
looking at that. They're just like, oh, we hired a face.
Right. Right.
And so, and that's been my experience in a few of the sectors. I feel like that was my, why I was hired in certain campaign jobs. It wasn't necessarily because, I could get the job done. It's because I could fill a role for them.
Mm.
And I would say the same in some of the private sector jobs. They were, they did talk to me, excuse me, about, oh, we're moving in a progressive, direction. We want to diversify the workplace. Our leaders are going to look like you, or should represent you. And so I was a good hire. But then once you get into the workplace, the moves that they're making with the constant reorganizations do not reflect the words that you were sold when you were brought in.
Mm. So then that's literally perfect, right? So it kind of rolls into what are the challenges that are presented with not having a diverse workplace outside of the current, right? Like we already know what happens when you don't have a diverse workplace.
Right.
But what becomes the challenge when the workplace is actually diverse?
Or not diverse?
I mean,
Oh,
both. Yeah, either
okay.
or.
Well, okay. So when it is diverse,
Mm-hmm.
I would say, we're being looked at as being militant
Mm.
or, trying to overturn or overthrow the status quo. Where in reality, you're just not open to change, right? On the flip side, when the challenge of, being in a workplace that says they're diverse, but it's not representative in thought, in race, in gender at all, it's as if you're just put on the background. You're just given the like, oh yeah, thank you. Great. Goodbye. Thanks. And you're just going on with like whatever it is that you want to do. And so really one of the biggest challenges, as if I can, for both sides, that I can say, I can boil it down to, is it's the lack of sponsorship. Because we can get mentors from anywhere, right? But
Right.
no one is pushing for me. No one is speaking to like my contributions, because I have my value. I know what I can bring to the table. I know what you bring to the table, Anna. But like, can someone in the workplace who does not look like me, who's not been, an immigrant from the Dominican Republic or lived in Baltimore, or like, can you understand that and then bring my, my contributions to the larger group who are making these decisions? And that's what I think is the challenge about a diverse or a non-diverse workplace. The lack of sponsorship in many different areas, but like no one's bringing me up, no one's lifting me.
I think that also ties into being an ally. And I think those two kind of go hand in hand. It's like, yeah, sponsor, in my eyes, is pretty much saying that someone's willing to bet all on you. That they can literally say that on a professional level, they have actually worked with you. Because let's be honest, people will add you to their resume reference list, knowing damn well you probably work with them for like 6 months. And they're like, hey, Jay, can I add you to this list? It's like, no. I want a sponsor to really say that I know her work ethic. I know that she is able to take on X, Y, and Z because I've seen it. I've worked with her for years. I can trust that my business, I can trust that my leaders or my, or my colleagues can excel being in this person's presence. And having a sponsor, I think, is the premier thing that people should actually be having versus a mentor. I think even on one like my 9 to 5 gigs, they had this, what is it called, like a cross integral mentorship program. First of all, the name was super long, and I already thought that shit sounded crazy. I was like, this sounds sus already. But come to find out what it was, they pretty much tried to market it as saying, hey, do you want to be a leader? And in order to do so, this is what you have to do. You're going to have to get someone that is not your same age and basically a different generation, a different race, a different ethnicity, and they're going to mentor you. How are you, baby boomer, white European man, going to tell me, millennial Black woman, how to rise to the top?
Right. And you make a very good point, Coach, that it is a lot of responsibility on the sponsor because they do have to vouch for your work. And it's a lot of, whether people believe it or not, it's a lot of political capital that you are giving up when you put your name behind a candidate or candidates.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a level of trust that you just have to give up, right? Because if these folks perform well for you and then F everything up on the other side, like it could potentially down you as well. So yes, there is a level of unmeasured or untalked about trust that goes into it. But that is the key. That is the key. It is, it's the secret sauce that we are not taught about. But it also brings an extra burden, right? Because if you're asking another person of color who has reached a certain, level of status within the organization to be your sponsor, then it's like you're not only working double hard, you're working 5 times as hard to make sure that you are proving yourself and you're not disappointing the person who put their name behind you.
Oh, so
it's almost like, I feel like it's a lose-lose situation.
Please explain more. What would that even mean?
It's a lose-lose because, well, this is that kind of podcast, but like the mediocre man is out here talking over me, telling all of this, the stories and the stuff that he ain't doing. He's gone home to his wife, nannies, all sorts of babysitters. And I'm still working past 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night. I'm picking up phone calls on the weekends. Right. And I'm supposed to come into the office or into meetings or into this workspace being okay with that because, quote unquote, that's how it goes.
Yeah. Now that is facts.
But if I show any type of resentment, it reflects back on that sponsor.
Of course.
So that's why I'm like, it's a lose-lose situation because I literally do not, I feel that I do not have the agency to ever show up as myself, especially if I have gained the honor of having a sponsor.
So you know what's even interesting, right? So that kind of flows into code switching. Like you're
Mm-hmm.
never really being your true authentic self in the workplace. And I think it's really sad for anyone that's a minority, period. And we're talking about all of the colors, right? That's our biggest thing. When we're talking about minorities, I want people to understand who's listening to be really clear about what I'm saying. It's not just black or brown. We want all of the colors. Apparently, as one of my girlfriends says, and to this day I still giggle. She's like, white women are also minorities. I busted out laughing, Jay, when she
Girl,
said that.
stop it.
Girl, that's what I said. Thank you. I said, what? I'm like, y'all still are ahead of the curve compared to most of us. But okay, I'll let you have that for like 5 more minutes, but you keep on saying it. It's just going to make me laugh.
Right.
She's like, no, we're a minority too. I'm like, where,
No, you're
hun?
not.
I'm like, okay, maybe on this paperwork, but not in real life because you're still out here winning, boo.
Thank
But we're right, but we're talking about this authentic form of self. And you're absolutely right. I think even when black and brown or just minorities start moving up, part of it also was fear. Like I'm not a fan of necessarily being an ally or even being a sponsor for some people because of that one fail swoop. Like they'll assume that because I'm black and you black, that I'm just gonna sign off. It's like, no, hun, I'm not. Because you're not
Right.
gonna A, ruin my name or my reputation if you don't cut it. And then B, they're gonna start looking at me side eye like, you vouch for this person. Like, what the heck is up?
I know, but why? Why did we have to put ourselves that extra layer of stress? That doesn't happen on the
I know.
other side.
I know. I know it doesn't. And maybe it does, and we just don't know about it because I'm playing devil's advocate, right? So it's like maybe they do have people that's just not cutting it. Maybe. But then in reality, it's like how often do we see brown or blacks that are actually making it to the top? And when they do make it to the top, how are you not, full blown doing crab in the barrel type stuff? Because let's be honest, once you're up there, most people are not trying to bring their 10 closest friends. They're just
Right.
not. Like, they're just really not. Like, I'm just keeping 100, especially when you're black, because it's like, no, no, no. I now need to be the only one in the room. Not just that I got in it, I need to be the only one. So then you start doing small, sneaky stuff. A girlfriend of mine just told me a story today, matter of fact, this morning, and she's in the medical field. And that's probably going to be an episode that we'll all be doing together about saving face of how the minorities, especially in the nursing and in the nurse practitioner field itself, makes it extremely difficult because once you kind of hit a pinnacle of excellence and you get certain certifications, that bowl gets so small that there's only so much space for everyone to eat. So now,
Right.
not only are you trying to still quote unquote empower each other, like, yes, sis, you got this. But now it's like, I don't know about that, sis, because now it's you, me, and 5 other sis that are trying to
Right.
get the same job. So, that's a big thing. You'd be like, well, what are we about to do, y'all?
Right. Right. I mean, and it brings us back to the original question about how leaders can preserve dignity and build trust. And,
Mhm.
ultimately, we have to I think leaders need to look at us as humans,
Yes,
humans that feel, humans that have obligations, humans that also fail and can come back from that failure.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, what other things would you say,
I
Coach?
think I think that's actually hitting the nose on the head, being able to say, you know what? There's some L's that you have to be okay with taking,
Mm,
but
yes.
also being really honest with yourself to realize that for any type of diverse workforce, not everyone's going to get along. And we keep
Yes.
on going back to saying it's okay to disagree. It's okay to have, micro disputes and be okay with it and being able to say, you know what, you bring a lot of different perspectives to the table. So I'm going to agree to disagree with you on this.
That
I
is so
know
key.
that it is. It's like, you know what? I may not understand exactly what you're trying to say, but I know that you've done your due diligence, you've done your research, and you just came up with a different perspective that wasn't necessarily mine. And that is okay. But let's just be really honest, Jay. Most people don't want to do that. Everyone
Right.
wants to have a very group think mentality, knowing that this company or this job had hired you for the polar opposite effects. Like, I knew they brought me on because they knew that my thought process was not going to be the status quo. It wasn't going to be that herd mentality. you're gonna have the one solo wolf out there like, nah, B, that don't even look right. That don't even
Right.
sound right. Well, everyone's like, bye, yes, bye, yes. I'm like, nah, lamb chop, she wrong. She real wrong. She's real wrong.
Oh, man.
And yet
But
that is where we are.
right. And I think to bring it back to you have to be willing to take an L. I would expand on that it goes for the sponsors. The sponsors don't necessarily have to look like me. You have to be willing to take that L.
Yes.
Or on the flip side, take that chance.
Yeah. And you have to be okay with doing it. I think a lot of people talk about that risk that they want to take in the workplace, but let's just be honest. Like, you're not really trying to risk if you know that money or your reputation is on the line.
Correct.
Sometimes that's probably one of the biggest things that most leaders will want to do, is take the chance knowing that the outcome could be phenomenal. I mean,
Correct.
look at Bezos. He's the perfect example of taking a risk was. No one knew what the heck Amazon was. And now look at it. That thing is freaking addictive. I don't know if it's worse than TikTok, but either or,
Right.
Bezos out here winning, and so is his ex-wife. So before we end up going, I know we have to take a brief pause moment. We do have a sponsorship message. We'll be right back. Hey guys, what's going on? It's your girl, Coach Ham. And before we get deeper into this episode, I wanted to stop and ask you a question. Have you heard about Anchor? And I mean Anchor, not for a boat, but it is anchor.com. It is the easiest way for you to create your own podcast from your phone or your desktop. So before you scratch your head and figure out what's going on, let me explain. So it's free. It's a creation tool that you can literally work off of your phone or your desktop or laptop or even your iPad. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so you don't have to do all that tedious manual labor that you've probably been doing previously, unless you've been paying a sound engineer. Did I also mention that it was free? Oh yeah, I did mention that. On top of the fact that Anchor will then distribute your own episodes for you, so you can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, pretty much anywhere a podcast can be heard. You can even make money from your podcast. Yes, I understand that people do it all the time. There's so many other programs, but this is the easiest way for you to do it. All you have to do is download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Once again, that is anchor.fm to get started, and I'll see you there.
Check. I want to see how this gets started. All right. Check. I want to see how this gets started. All right.
We are back, and we are on our last and final thing to discuss. Representation matters, I should say, when you are a marginalized group. So once again, we talk about by the numbers. So according to this one research article, between 2007, there was a 13% decrease in the number of Black women professionals. Mm-hmm. So this is the represented marginalized group, right? This is the one subsector of most companies, whether you're private, whether you're a civil servant, whatever the case may be, law enforcement, military. Why do you think that is, that there's a 13% decrease in numbers of Black women professionals?
So it's a great question. Well, one is, who wants to work this hard for zero recognition?
Mm-hmm.
Zero opportunity to get to where you are. I'm making so much less and doing so much more work. Mm-hmm. I have to continue to fight to prove that I belong where I'm at. Mm. And I think we just, plain and simple, we got tired. Mm. And it's not worth it towards, I think what society has moved to, and particularly for Black women, is we've recognized our power, not just at home, but in the workplace, in society, in communities, in all sectors. And so if we're not going to get paid, we're not going to stick around to be abused. Because at the end of the day, that's what we come out feeling. We come out feeling abused. We come out feeling undervalued. There's so many, high levels of depression that we have to deal with. We're also, a large majority of caretakers across our communities as women of color. And so we're doing like triple duty. And at the end of the day, like, I think, women are choosing the thing that's feeding them and working for a company or organization that's going to demean them and then just, keep putting the foot on top of their head, no matter how high they try to rise. It's just not worth their time and effort anymore.
Ooh, that's really good. Like that is, that is so good. And you're absolutely right. I think Black women forever has been sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I think that's the one line that everyone always likes to use, but it's the truth. Like it is the absolute truth. When you know that you pretty much have done all you can do, when you start seeing an exodus of Black women exiting companies.
Right.
Like at the end of the day, that's when you honestly have effed up.
I agree, because I don't think you can find any more loyal of an employee sector.
Absolutely. Like we will stay in a job 15, 30, 45 years, the same job, our parents did. So when you have our millennials that just start coming up, they're like, yeah, I want to leave in 5 years, because every 5 years we're like, oh, we're on to something else. And our parents are like, have you lost your mind? Like, you gonna leave that good
years.
Right. Look, everyone else be like, you gonna leave that good government job to do what now? Make candles. That sounds crazy. It's like, mama, let me live.
Let me live. Yes. I can't tell you how many times I've heard it from my mom, even after coming back into the government sector. She goes, well, you're good now. I said, good for what, ma'am?
Yeah. Well, look, yeah.
Yeah.
But then the question is like, well, then what do you do? So what's the response? What is the on to the next? Because we're not complacent. I think that is the one beautiful thing about having this type of generation. We're not complacent. We want to be extremely smart about how we're being intentional in this world. That it's not just fixing widgets. We're not, being coal miners. We're literally saying, hey, I want to be able to do something impactful, and not just so I can have a really long obituary, but I can actually have people come on the day that I rise up to glory and be like, you know what? She really made my life something special.
Right.
And in order to do that, you have to start making moves.
Agreed. And I think, one of the ways is we as women, we as Black women, women of color across all communities, we have to give our flowers while we're still here.
Mm-hmm.
Like if she's doing something right, put her in an article, write about her in your newsletter, nominate her for an award, bring her to, career days. Hello, like she's not just doing this in vain. Show that there are more, right? I think the other thing is, if there is an opportunity, or you see that you can create an opportunity, right? Because some of these jobs, particularly in government and in private sector, people are writing job descriptions to bring in their friends. Why can't your friend, your daughter, your sister-in-law, your husband's mother's friend, why can't they be the ones that you bring in?
Because I don't trust them.
Not be afraid. I'm just saying, do not be afraid. And I may have been extra, but
right. I don't trust them Negroes. My bad. Okay, we'll get there.
I'm just saying, why can't you, bring people in behind you? And I guess that's the biggest point, right? Don't close the door behind you. There is room for more than you.
Okay. That's so good.
So yeah. And, for me, that's my why. That's why I coach. That's why, I volunteer. hours that I probably don't have because I'm like, I'm not going to be here forever. And I've been so blessed and fortunate to meet people like you, to be in spaces that people will never, ever dream up for themselves. And so I don't do any good for anybody, especially the world that I'm trying to leave behind, if I die with this knowledge or this access or this, this level of vulnerability or pretty much access. So that's my why. And that's what I believe that we need to, what we need to operate from. We don't need to close the door behind us. There's room for everybody.
Well, Jay, that was absolutely beautifully said as we close the end of this episode. I know that we'll be having you back in a couple of weeks so we can start talking about how to save face in the workplace part 2.
Yes.
But let us know, let my folks know, where can they find you, the who, what, where, when, why, and what else you got for them?
Okay, well, if you would like to get any one-on-one coaching or group coaching, I can be found at vipcoaching.me. I also have a podcast, and my podcast is solely centered on connections, different types of relationships and how we relate to each other, whether it's familial, intimate relationships, friendship relationships, etc. And that can be at Jintransit. And that's my Instagram, but it's also on all streaming platforms.
Okay, Jintransit. If you have not checked it, it's freaking dope. I love it. And if you have not already done so, please subscribe to this show. You can find us on Spotify, Pandora, or wherever you are listening to your podcast right now. But be sure to check us out next week, or actually in 2 weeks, for our next episode. What will it be? Who really knows? But most likely it's probably going to be a Talk Money Tuesday throwback. We'll be talking about emotional intelligence and your parents, how to make sure their money is not going to get scammed or skipped. That's with your retirement money kid, D. Campbell. But until next time, guys, peace. And we're out.
Well, that was fun.
That is dope. Now the question is, how the heck do I link all of my stuff together? I'm going to be playing on this tonight. It's going to be fun.
Or this week. Yeah, that's why I was like, I like this app because they will distribute it, but you already have a podcast. So we're trying to see to make sure that it gets linked to your podcast and not start a whole new link.
Yeah. So let me do some editing and then I'll call you later this week to figure out how to make sure all this stuff goes together.
Okay. And I'm releasing your episode most likely after 4th of July because I'm going to put out my friend's, I was going to put out a male voice first.
Okay.
And then your episode will be the week after. So Perfect. It looks like it'll sync when you throw in your throwback.
Yay. Perfect.
Yeah. Awesome.
Cool. All right, Mama, I will talk to you later. Let me get busy and work on this editing.
Okay, well, thank you. This was fun. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.